Yes, it is. I'm just going to start off by asking people who were involved in either being stewards or planning the budget or commenting on the budget. Please stand up for a second. I know the finance committee, the board, lots of stewards and so forth have put in tremendous efforts, and I would like to give all of them a hand.
And
Tracy, let me just remind everybody that next week we will have an official congregational meeting on which this will be essentially approved or put up for approval, and also the candidates for board and nominating committee will be elected, or so the slated candidates will be nominated. So it's very important to be here. We'll need a quorum. So please plan to be here next week for the official congregational meeting, but hopefully we can take care of details about the budget today and get everybody informed. Thank you. And Tracy, of course, our expert that we're going to miss tremendously with their plan. That we wish them very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you all for that nice applause, but also for staying for the budget. And when I see this many people, when it's a discussion of finances, I get excited. I said, wow, there's more people. I thought maybe there'd be 3 people. Bill will remember. Bill, I'm going to call you out. Last year, some of you may remember I did a little office hours. I said, anyone who wants to come for office hours to learn more about the budget, please come after service on Sunday.
And I came in and there was one person, Bill Swallen. So I'm glad to see you all. And those on Zoom, I do see just a couple people on Zoom. I just want to make sure you know there's no slides. So Martin has dropped the budget spreadsheet into the chat. And you also received the email on Friday. So you can have a look if you want to follow along. All right? So first, just housekeeping. Did anybody not get a handout? So there's a whole stack right here of extra handouts in the first chair. Lisa's going to help. Just make sure everybody gets the budget. Oh, good. So you all have that. And this should be relatively easy. I have the handheld mic because we're going to open it up for questions after. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. So I will put that down. All right, so what I gave you all, hopefully you received it on Friday. Lisa was kind enough to send it out over email for those who wanted to look in advance. This is the same copy that you already saw. And for those who are following along, this is actually the same budget that you saw when Marianne kicked off the stewardship campaign. So this should not be new, which is exciting. There are only a few updates, but I want to give you a quick overview before I get into the updates. And then, as I said, we'll open it up to questions. So the first thing, for those who don't know the way the budget process works, is what we do is we ask all the committee leads to submit their requests based on what they've been spending and based on future needs for next year. They submit that in the fall. So this is kind of a long process, but that's the way budget processes do really work. So you get the input from the committee leads, then we start building a budget of what we think we're going to need. Then we look at what our pledges have been and what we want to, if we're going to need a pledge increase for next year. Now, as you know, we made a decision this year to not increase the pledges. Does anyone know why? What was that? Yes, the capital campaign. We wanted to be sensitive, so this was a little different because we said from the start we were going to try to come up with a balanced budget without increasing pledges. And that was so you all could consider the capital campaign contributions as well as your pledge contribution. So we wanted to be sensitive to that. In fact, like every year, utilities go up. Some other things do increase. Our UUA dues went up. So we did need to have a little bit of an increase. Then we had another thing happen this year that meant we would even need a bigger increase. Does anyone know what that is? The new minister, yes. So with a new minister who is moving here, who has a spouse, and who needs health insurance, we had to increase the budget to accommodate that. So there were a couple of unique things that happened in the budget this year. So if you take a look at it, look at the very first line and you'll see pledges received. The way that we do the budget is we show you fiscal year 23-24 budget and actual, then 24-25 budget, and then we did a projection. This is a new column. We wanted to see how the budget project to the best of our ability, how the year would end up this year so we could see what it was looking like as we did the budget for 25-26. So now I'm going to ask another question. Who knows when does budget year 25-26 start?
July 1.
Yes, excellent. This is confusing for people because it is in the middle of the year. So when we say 24-25, we're talking about July 1st, 2024 to June 30, 2025. And the 25-26 year starts on July 1st. So just want to make sure everyone has that in mind. So another thing super exciting, as Rick already acknowledged the stewards, we met our pledge goal. So we did not ask for an increase, but still we were asking for $253,443. So kudos to the congregation, because making that budget meant that is a huge part of our budget. Now, this is a challenging question. I should have brought prizes for these things. Does anyone know what percentage of our operating budget, not the finance committee, finance can't answer this question, nor can the board, who knows what percentage of our operating budget is made up by the pledges? 90% is a little higher, but it's a good guess. Anybody else? Who said 70? 75%. 75%. So if we don't make our pledge goal, it's a real stretch for us, because the rest of it, the 25%, look at the top part of this budget spreadsheet, and you'll see these are all the revenue items that contribute to the operating budget. So obviously rent is a big part of it. We also do hospitality collections, the rummage sale, plate, of course. People contribute every week to plate. So half of that goes to our operating budget. The other half goes to Seeds of Support, as you know. So that's the 25%, but 75% is the pledges. So very happily, we made our pledge goal this year, so that's in there. So what you probably most of you know, in our bylaws, it says we have to have a balanced budget. Do you know what a balanced budget means? Revenue has to equal, yes, the amount coming in, somebody said it, the amount coming in has to equal the amount going out. So we know what our expenses are, we know what our revenue is, and that means we end with a balanced budget. That is not that's fairly unique, actually. Those of you who come from the business world know you don't always start with a balanced budget. Some want more revenue than expenses. So we force ourselves to break even right from the beginning. And then any extra at the end of the budget year, do you know what happens to that money? Where does that money go?
Unanticipated, what's it?
Very close. Discretionary funds we call unanticipated needs funds, which is short, it's UNF. Unanticipated needs, don't feel as a congregation that that's a waste of money. We need those unanticipated needs funds because we have capital expenses that's not in the operating budget. Do you know what capital expenses are? Those are improvements to the building. Forget the renovation because that's a capital campaign. But if we needed a new roof, we're fixing the plumbing. These are improvements to the building that have to be made, but we don't know that they're going to come out of a particular year. So they're not in our operating budget. So we have to have a certain nest egg, if you will, in unanticipated needs that's exactly what it means. They're unanticipated. So we can draw on that. That's capital expenses or a big repair that we might have to do. Those are the kinds of things that come from unanticipated needs. So I'm happy to say, as a congregation, when Rick says we're healthy financially, we almost always, I won't say always just in case, but for the last, I can say 3 years, we have had a surplus. At the end of the year, we've brought in more or we've spent less, and that money goes to unanticipated needs. So I wanted to explain that so I can tell you what we did this year. So for this year, what we discovered, Marianne, question? I'll repeat it, so just hold on for a second. Not exactly. In other congregations, some take capital expenses and they amortize the value, and that has a depreciation every year of the value. But unanticipated needs, I would say it's closer to what other companies and maybe some congregations call a reserve. So you'd know in the business world, in my old world, we would do a capital reserve, a reserve of funds that we would actually budget for. That's what it's more similar to, I would say. Jack might correct me, but that's the layman's terms. But hold the thought, because we're going to pass around the mic, and I did say I was going to repeat the question, and I didn't. But what Marianne's question was could we think of unanticipated needs as depreciation? And I would say it's a little bit more like a reserve. So if you look this year, what worked to our favor is fiscal year 24-25, and remember, you've seen this already from the capital campaign. We knew we were going to come in with a larger than usual surplus for two big reasons. One, not only is Roger a fabulous minister, but Roger saved us a little bit of money this year because Roger's expenses wound up being lower. He did not need the health insurance that we budgeted. There were some other things that you can see in the budget. So we had some savings from the minister. Thank you, Roger. We also, as you know, did not have a full-time music director this year. We had a part-time, and Karen is here. Thankfully for Karen and Marshall, we had a scaled back music program, and we had budgeted for a full-time music program. Between those two items, even without any other savings, we knew that we would be carrying a larger than usual surplus. And you can see on the very last page, the projection was over 30,000. I won't go into the specific, it's like 35, I think, but you can find it. But the point is, what we decided to do for the first time is to have a minister reserve. So if you look, I have to put my glasses on for this, at the very end of, under miscellaneous, you will see it's total 4,500 miscellaneous, that number. Below that, you will see Minister Transition Reserve from FY 24-25 was $15,472. And Oh, sorry. Thank you. Page 1. Page 1, 3/4 of the way down, you will see a line before total operating revenue that explains that we put in a minister transition reserve of $15,472. It's the first time we've done this, but remember, the reason we did it, and I'm going to tell you the amount now that I'm explaining it, on the very last page, you will see that we were going to have approximately a $35,636,000 possible surplus. This is the money that would go into unanticipated needs. However, keep in mind, you all contributed to this year's operating budget with your pledges. So knowing we would have that large a surplus and knowing that we would need additional funds for next year's minister, and we had the savings from this year's minister and the music director, we decided to put that money in advance as a reserve toward next year's budget. That allowed us to keep the pledges at the same level. If we hadn't put that minister reserve in, we would have had to ask for more money, or we would have had to hire a newbie minister or a minister who didn't need health insurance, one of the two. So that's really the most complicated part of the whole presentation, because it's new. We've never done a minister reserve. But I will tell you, in other organizations, nonprofits and for-profits, this is very common to put a reserve in, and it was your money. So we discussed this, quite a bit, and we said this was the congregation contributed those pledges to this year's budget. So we should use that now because we know we're going to need it. So that's the minister reserve. With that, if you remember, you all received this in January in advance of the stewardship campaign. But during the course of the spring, there are always a couple of changes. One, we hired the minister. So remember, we had budgeted for, to the best of our ability, what we thought the minister's contract would be. But once we hired the minister, we found out exactly what the needs would be. And you can see those needs if you look on the bottom of page 1. Look at the shaded column, FY 25-26, and you will see the minister's salary, you will see the FICA self-employment tax, you will see the pension, you will see the health insurance. It was the health insurance, and you can look at this in more detail at home if you really would like to. You will see that it was the health insurance that really changed, meant we needed even more dollars, because this person is not close to retirement, so they needed the full health insurance, and they wanted the, of course, insurance for their spouse. So this is UUA health insurance costs. And with all of the figures, we knew we needed those additional funds. So that was a change. The other thing that was a very slight change, but I do want to highlight it because it is exciting, Martin, who's back there in the booth, Martin joined us as a staff employee. So that was a small change that only added a little bit in increase because obviously there's matching FICA, and we added some additional hours for events for us to use Martin's expertise. So what you see in the yellow highlights, and you can go back to, sorry, not yellow because you don't have color, the shaded in the FY 25, I hope it's extra shaded so you can see, there's one on the first page, rental income. You see 733125. That went up $331. That was so we could get a balanced budget. So all I wanted to explain is everything that's in that kind of darker shading, and let me see if it really came out. Not really, did it? Oh, it's lighter? Okay, thank you, because I'm seeing two colored copies here, so I can't see it. But if it came out lighter, those are the items, and the one I emailed, of course, is in color, so you can see the Friday version. Those were all the changes that happened since you got this budget in January for the stewardship campaign. So there were very few changes, but as I mentioned earlier, because we had to have a balanced budget, we did have to make a few changes. So what did we do? Look at page 2. Well, the first one I just said, but I'll reiterate. We added $331.25 to rental income. That allowed us, that's part of how we got to a balanced budget. If you can believe, we were short $331. So we looked and we said, rentals, we were a little conservative on rentals because of the renovation. We thought we could add $331 to that line. So page 2, the changes that we did here, because we had the increases at the top in the minister expense, the benefits expenses, we realized that Roger is here for the month of July. The new minister doesn't start till August 1st. So what we did was we just figured out the math. The savings from Roger being here for 1 month of the year, that was $3,312.08 savings that we were able to accommodate here. What you don't see in this budget, but you did see in the January, is we had $10,000 for relocation as part of the operating budget. We decided to take that out of unanticipated needs. So there's no $10,000 relo reflected in here either. So that was another way we got to the balanced budget. The changes on page 2 still, under media tech lead, were very minor increases, but those are in there. And then if you go to page 3, it was only highlighted because the total for administration changed. Media tech is part of administration. There were no changes on page 4. And then on page 5, we made one change. As some of you know, UU Jazz has really gone through a period of uncertainty. They lost their leadership. We are still waiting. Now, a new leader has been announced, but that person has said they're going to go around to each congregation, see the needs, and then figure out a new plan. So Dixie King and the Social Justice Committee decided not to make a UU Jazz pledge for next year, which is $733 normally. We're not making it this year, and we're not making one next year. However, she said if they do come up with their plan during the course of the year, they will use other funds from the Social Justice Committee and still make a pledge, because we all want to support UU Jazz if they have a plan, a stable plan. But we took it out of the operating budget, so that was less $733. So you get to the end, which is a balanced budget, as you see. Total expenses, $305,921. Total revenue, $305,921. And we're still anticipating a surplus of about $20,000 this year that we will put into unanticipated needs. Last year, we only had a surplus of about $10,000. So we're actually in quite good shape. And that is my presentation. So I am going to, I have the mic. I saw Jack had a question, I believe, if he still does. I'll turn it on, and I'm going to pass this around and answer questions. And maybe somebody volunteers to be the mic. All right. Oh, Bill, Rick, Bill, fight over this mic. All right. So Bill's going to take the mic, and we're going to go around if there are any questions.
Is it on?
Should be.
Yes, it is. Where's Jack? There he is.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that on page 1 near the bottom, minister's salary, for the fiscal year 24-25 year-end projection, which is coming up in a few weeks, we have $37,986 as minister's salary, And I don't want people to think that that's the reason why Roger talked about economics and theology today, because it looks like it doubled, but in fact, if you look at the next page, as is common for ministers, ministers are able to split their compensation between, say, a salary and a parsonage allowance or a housing allowance, which is what he did. And if you add the 35,000 housing allowance on page 2 with the 37,986, I think it comes up pretty close to the 83,000, if not exactly to the penny.
Great.
So it's not like we're paying twice as much for the minister.
Very good
next
point.
year. And
Yes. Oh, and we should add one other thing, Jack, to that. Please look at 23-24 and 24-25. You will see that the reason it's split in the actual is because we know what the difference, even Reverend Patty did this. We just knew what the housing was going to be. We don't know yet what the housing is going to be for the new minister, so we put it in total salary. So 83,000 is the combination of the salary and the housing allowance. Later in future reports, you're going to see that amount split when we know what the expenses are.
And that whole housing allowance thing is something that, Congress allows, and it's a recommendation or a suggestion by the minister that has to be approved by the congregation in writing at the beginning of each year. So we have to plan ahead because we're on a fiscal year for the budget, but it's a calendar year
Yes, excellent.
type of adjustment.
And Jack and Roger know probably this better than anybody. We follow the tax clergy guide. This isn't just a made-up number by the minister. They have to have documentation of what their housing allowance is in case the IRS were ever to audit them. So just so you're aware of that. Correct.
It's not a congregational vote. It's the board.
Rick is just clarifying that the board approves the housing allowance. It's not up to a congregation vote. It's the board vote. Very good. Thank you, Jack. That's an important point. Kelsey has a question, and then we'll go around.
My question's on page 1, the unpaid pledges.
Ah, yes.
So if I look at 23-24, we anticipated $5,000 in unpaid pledges, but then there's no actual. And then this year, the same, and then there's no actual. Can
Very
you
good
explain that?
question. Yes, very good question. Thank you that you noticed it. The way you'll see the answer is in the first line under additional details. What we do is the actual is actually there. So in the top line, we budgeted $237,049, but our actual was $223,219. Very first line, which is 4111 pledges received. You will see that the unpaid pledges is in the total of actual. We didn't call it out. But Kelsey allows me to make a very good point, which is I went back to see how are we really doing, because we always budget for this unpaid pledges. How do we really come out? And I was a little surprised. In 22-23, we were at 93%. So we missed our pledges by 7%. In 23-24, which was last full year, we missed by 6%. So if you actually read my treasurer's column in the newsletter, you'll see that I've been noting our goal this year. We hope if we make our pledge goal this year, our surplus will be even higher for unanticipated needs, which would be so wonderful. But I'm hoping at least we're going to hit 95%. My goal is to have it keep getting closer and closer to our pledge goal. But Kelsey, to your point, in actuality, we have been missing by even more than what we've been budgeting for. However, we do make up for it a little bit in plate. So our plate usually exceeds what we budget. We're conservative because you can't know what's going to be happening with weekly donations. But we have been exceeding there, and we have been exceeding in other donations from the congregation. It's a very generous congregation, but we've been missing our pledges by that much. And some of it's because people move. Some people sadly pass away. So there are circumstances. We do also augment, I should explain, the second line, 4111-401, pledges prior period. I'll make a little plug here too. You may not know, but if you submit your last check a day late, I can't put it in for this year. It goes to next year. So that's every year we have to budget. We're on a cash basis, so we have to budget a pledge that's received late is going to be counted, but it's in next pledge year. So that's a plug to get your pledges in before the end of June. It's actually in the mail. Lisa, if Lisa were here, I would thank her. Lisa just mailed them. Yay! So Lisa has been a huge help, and so has Elaine. Elaine, who knows mail merge, I do not. She is a whiz. So Elaine was able to mail merge from QuickBooks to the letter, which saves a ton of time. So she did that work, and Lisa just did the mailing. And those who requested, there were 30 some odd people who said they would prefer to receive their statement in email. And Lisa, am I right? The emails went out as well? Emails will go out Monday, so you'll get that, and that should give you plenty of time to plan ahead. Thank you, Kelsey. That's a great point. Other questions? Yes, right here, Bill. Mary. Oh, someone may have turned it. Yeah. Yes. Very good question. Thank you. You guys are on it, and this is all excellent points. So this is a change just this year. We do, if you are a committee lead, you get monthly reports. And actually, I should say, the whole congregation can always see all the monthly reports on the website. The committee leads get them by me over email. There is another report called the P&L, profit and loss. That is everything that comes in and everything that goes out every month in Granite Peak. But this is an operations-only budget. So you don't see fair trade in here. Why? Because fair trade isn't going to our operations budget. What we spend, as you know, for coffee, we get back in as you buy things from the store. SOS, as we get donations, that check goes right out to an external community organization. It's not part of operating Granite Peak. So if you remembered last year, poor Marianne, because we had everything in the budget, that people called this the Bible. This is much more condensed. Empty Bowls is not in here. The capital campaign is not in here because that money isn't part of operations for Granite Peak. So you can see all of that activity on the P&L, and that's by month on the website. Yeah, Mary. Is it on? Check the green if the power light went off.
50% of plate collections went to SOS and 50% to
Correct.
the general operating budget.
That's correct. So all you see here is this plate that's why it says plate hyphen operations. This is only the half a plate. And now I'll give you a little bit of clarification because I want to be exact on this because I know people get confused about this. Half of the cash is split between operations and SOS. However, if you write a check and you put it in your in the bag for the Sunday instead of in the deposits, if you write a check, that is not split. It's too difficult for the accountant to start splitting by every check. So if you do a check, unless you put something specific in the memo line, it's going to the operating budget. It does not, no half of your check is going to SOS. The only way, if you write a check, that it's going to go to SOS is if you put in the memo 50% SOS or all SOS or to something else, to empty bowls. Anything that's in the memo is going to go where you designate it. Yes, thank you. Bill, behind you with Bronwyn and then Mary Ann.
Last year, I mentioned that Ainsley O'Donnell wasn't making enough money, and so we were offered an opportunity to pay separately into that budget as a congregation. And I'm noticing now that she's making, this is on the last page, under Coordinator Early Childhood Faith Development. So she's making $19 an hour times 2 hours per week. And I look up at Sandra, and she's making $20.50 at 15 hours per week. So now I'm concerned that the assistant shouldn't be making that much if Sandra is only making $20.50.
Well, I'll answer it this way. One,
is that still going on? That
you can be sure. Well, I'm not aware of this separate. That's the first I'm hearing of this. Yeah. So if other people decided to do that, that would be up to them.
Okay.
But here's the good news. You all have a personnel committee now under Russ's leadership. And it has been wonderful because that is what the personnel team does. So you should feel confident. What the personnel team does is they look at the UUA guidelines. They look to see that we're paying fair wages. We checked the pension to make sure that we're covering when people are getting their pension. There are a lot of nuances in the benefits that Russ and Elaine and Roger and Lila, I knew there was one Lila. Thanks to their efforts, that has really improved things. So the decision of Ainsley at 19 was matched as assistant, at that level. And then the other thing that I'm sure goes into that is she only works, she works less hours. So you always want to think of that too, is how many hours a person is working. The other thing this year is that Ainsley has picked up hours because she has covered for Sandra. They have an arrangement where Sandra has had to be in California. So there are weeks that Ainsley is actually covering for Sandra, and that's coming out of Sandra's comp budget, not what you see there, just to let you know that. But I can't speak to this extra fund, Bronwyn, because I don't know about that, the extra funds. Yeah, so if it was anything that had to happen to Granite Peak, I should know about it as the treasurer, which leads me to believe that this happened separately as a group, and they just did it on their own, which is allowed, but we have nothing to do with that. So, Mary Ann, I think you had the next one.
I just had another comment.
Oh, yes.
I have another comment, yes. That when I was doing after school classes on birding, I was getting.
Yeah, keep that green light on.
Shucks.
Yeah, all I can say on the comp is we did, if you don't remember this, not all I can say, I should say, we gave significant increases this past year. Not this year. This year, it was incremental to inflation. But remember, 24-25, we went through, as I mentioned with the personnel team, we matched it against the UUA guidelines, and we increased everybody's compensation to the levels that they were at. So we feel, and Russ, would you agree that we're now on par as well as we can be for a nonprofit congregation?
Yeah, I think we were quite a ways behind, and we made good ground. We probably will have to go further in the future, but
Yeah.
we gained a lot. We were way behind.
Yeah.
Thank
Good.
you very much for explaining all of this.
Sure. All right, Mary Ann.
Just a quick encouragement that when people submit a check into the pouch on Sunday mornings, if it's for your pledge, please do write pledge in the memo line.
Good point. We do, when we see, if there's ever a question, we get a check and we're not sure. Lisa, our accountant, is also excellent at this. She and I look at QuickBooks and we see, is there a balance due on the pledge? If there is, we know it goes toward the pledge. If we can't tell, sometimes people give us a donation, they don't realize they've met their pledge. Some of you have gotten calls from me. You already met your pledge. What would you like to do with this extra money, and where would you like to donate it? So we try to keep on top of that, but it does make our job a lot easier if you put pledge on the check, and during the transition between the two fiscal years, ideally pledge 24-25 or pledge 25-26. I know that's asking a lot, but we got a lot of early pledges this year, and we missed that we were basically checking almost every check, because every deposit week there were 1 or 2 checks that were actually for next year. They were prepaid pledges. You can, although I would say, here's Mary Ann's answer. You want to pay early? Go for it. Yay, because then we get our pledge. Here's the finance person. Don't pay your pledge till July 1. It's your money. Just please do pay your pledge. But you don't have to pay it early. You can just, if you have it now though, and you might not later and you want to, of course, but you don't have to pay it early. We do, however, this is a good point. Don't think that this is interesting. This is an exception. If you make a prepaid pledge, it does not go to this year. Lisa actually holds it in reserve for July 1st. And so it is a little extra accounting on her part, but we will count it for next fiscal year. So you're okay on that one. All right, who's next? Mary Ann. Oh yes, Mary Ann. We'll get to you, Mary Ann.
So just to mention about members who do not pledge, but who make a contribution of record, it's really important if they pay cash, or if they write a check, that we know that it's their contribution of record that makes it possible for them to vote at any congregational meeting. So the cash would go in an envelope with the name, contribution of record, and then the accountant would know this is really important to record.
And Jack had a point behind you.
I know we're talking about operating budget pledge payments, but have any arrangements been made for people to designate, or how to designate, payments for their capital campaign pledges?
How do they do it, is what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. It's actually quite easy. If you write us a check and you put in the memo field capital campaign, that immediately goes to Norma. Norma is managing all the capital campaign deposits. We have a separate account, a separate checking account called Capital Campaign Contributions. I was kind of a pain. Norma would probably agree, that I did not want that money to be in our checking account at Granite Peak, because I was very concerned that we would lose track of even if we classified it, which we can, we decided to have a separate account. So Norma makes a separate deposit of capital campaign contributions, and we have a separate capital campaign P&L, which every month Russ and Norma, as co-chairs, receive. Here are all the contributions, which are kept confidential only to Russ and Norma. Here are the capital campaign contributions, and here are the capital campaign expenses, all our renovation costs, so we can always keep track. But as far as you making a contribution, it's as simple as capital campaign in the memo field is all you need to do. Rick, did you have a point? Yes, Mary.
At the risk of beating a dead horse, I still want to get this clear about if you, in the pouch, put cash,
Correct.
does that go all to the SOS thing?
Half.
Half.
And-
And half is, where's the other half reflected?
It's not here on this sheet, page 1,
Yeah.
4112, you see plate dash operations.
Oh, okay.
That's only the half. If you looked at the P&L, it's good to know though, if you look at the monthly P&L, you can always see the second line, which you don't see here, that says plate SOS. Sure. No, believe me, this has taken lots of conversations of how to make that very, very clear. And so you never have to be concerned about your SOS funds. What we do is we take that half, which is half the plate, which is your cash. And then don't forget, there's another line in the P&L you will see, it's called board designated SOS. Any check that you write that says SOS or PayPal, a lot of people do, well, not a lot, less are doing PayPal because of the transaction fees, which we appreciate. But if you do PayPal and you put SOS, that money is going into board designated SOS because it says SOS. Then what our accountant does, she sends me the monthly reports. I look at them and I look at those two lines. I add them together and we go one step further. I email her. Looks like SOS for the month of April is this amount. Is that correct? She emails me back, yes, that is correct. Then I put that into an SOS folder online and I write the check. So you know that the organizations are getting the half of the cash from Sunday's offering and any check that you write for SOS. Sure. That's important because we average about $700 a month, sometimes a little less, sometimes a lot more in SOS. So it's a big contribution for us for the year. Anything else? Yes, Lena.
Just clarifying, I think I'm suspecting that I have this correct, but under social justice, it's number 6,000, page 5. There's just one line with the bold, with the budget, which is what we are allowed supposedly or what we need to spend. But I'm assuming that we have chunks of cash which are, hefty.
Not here.
Right.
Yes.
And those are kind of like the SOS because they're not part of the budget, right?
Perfect. You got it, Lena. So it's not part of the budget. It is families in need. You might have wondered, where's families in need? Where's Ministers' Benevolence? Where's Food Pantry? The reason, again, we don't put those in operations budget. Think about it this way. Do we know how much money we're going to get next year for the food pantry? We have no idea. How could we possibly budget for it? And would we ever put more than we spend? No. Whatever donations we get for the food pantry is what we're going to give. Same thing with Empty Bowls. Same thing with SOS. This is money that doesn't come to Granite Peak. It's money that comes in and money that goes out. So those are in the P&L. They're not part of the Granite Peak operations. Now, I may be giving you one level. Some people might say, oh, Tracy, don't go there. But there is a third report. There are 3 financial reports. Does anyone know which one we have not talked about? I said this is budget versus actual, which you get every month on the website. P&L, which is our activity every month. There's a third report. Yes, Marianne? The balance sheet. Whoa, that's good. So the third report, the balance sheet. Does anyone, Jack, do you want to tell everybody what the balance sheet is?
No. The balance sheet shows the assets of the organization.
Yes.
What we own, money in the bank, the building, things like that. And then it also shows liabilities, what we owe on the mortgage, what we may owe for, I don't know, payroll taxes for a particular quarter. And then it also shows fund equity. So
Yes.
like the net.
That's perfect. That's good. The reason I say you should know what the balance sheet is all of the money that Lena's talking about are on the balance sheet because they're our assets. So what Dixie and Lena have to do little differently than other committee leads, and they know this because I keep reminding them, don't forget to look at your assets on the balance sheet. I know, let's see how good I can remember, we have about $10,000 in families in need. It's about right? We have about 3,000 or 2,800 in the food pantry. So we're running a little low. So I'll send a note to Dixie. We only have 2,800 left because it's different than the operating budget. We don't have another pool. If we run out of that money, those are the assets that are left. So if you ever want to see Granite Peak's assets, go every month. I give them to Art. He puts them on the website. You should be able to find, what month are we in? We have not done the April reports yet because I get them in the second week of the month. So you will see March's, the balance sheet, the P&L, and the budget versus actual. And then by about the third week, fourth week at the latest of May, you'll see April. So we run almost a month behind by the time they're all cleaned up and done and blah, blah, blah. But that's where you can see all those other assets. That's a great question, Lena. Anything else? I think we're going to just maybe take a last question if there is one. All right. Well, gosh, thank you. These were great questions and comments. Thank you. And I know Rick will come up because then you'll vote on this next week.
That's right. Hopefully, after this extensive description and answering questions, we can have a effective and fairly brief meeting next week, hopefully. Of course, remember that there's also a slate of candidates to be voted on, too. So that's the order of business for next week. So show up.